Hello, my name's Paul Matthews. Welcome to Ripple Hive Chat. We're here with a lovely gentleman called Chris Finnen. Chris, you've had a colourful career.
Yes.
How about sharing it with our friends here at Ripple Hive?
Be more than happy to do
the start of your career and where it all started for you.
Well, funnily enough, you guys are working in radio on this modern technology and online radio. Radio was my first experience of hearing music that moved me. I mean, as a kid, my parents would play records that I liked, but then I happened to live 30 miles south of London, and it was when the Beatles and the Stones were coming out, and whammo, that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you immigrated over here initially to Victoria when you first moved over here, wasn't it?
Yeah, I came to Australia in '67 when I was 14, moved to Victoria, left school at 16, and I'd started playing guitar at the age of 8, some folk music, and then blues was probably the first music I really liked that I wanted to play, and then pop music as well. So when I left school, I just took up guitar and played guitar and formed my first band, and then there were a lot of gigs around in Victoria, and I think there was about like 40 gigs a week. Yeah. Lots of gigs everywhere. So you'd get a band together and off you go and play. Yeah. And you'd get your records imported. My grandmother used to send me out a couple of magazines. One was called Melody Maker and one was called New Music Express. Yeah. And you get these. She couldn't afford to do it, and she did it. The silly lady, you know. She used to send us a couple of comics and every month we get this parcel. But the Melody Maker would have reviews of records that had come out in England or America, of artists that Australian record companies weren't really great at releasing a lot of stuff back in those days, unless it was commercial pop music. So you get the names of these records, and you'd get an import record sent out, which usually was an LP, came with shrink wrap, and you break the shrink wrap, get the record out, learn some of the tunes, and then you could go and play those tunes with your band, and there were tunes that other bands weren't playing. So you gradually, over the years, you build up a repertoire of music.
Yeah, that sounds great. Now you've been inducted into the Hall of Fame and everything. You know, how does that feel when you're being recognised as that as an artist for yourself? I
thought to myself, you know, you just you plough away at this. I've been playing music full time for over 40 years, and my intentions have always been the same, I guess. Whenever I do a gig, to try and do a good gig, entertain an audience, and first and foremost for me is the emotional content of the music. That it has to mean something. There's no sense in monkey see, monkey do to me, or copying something just for the sake of playing it. To me, it has to have some emotion behind it that's going to be of use to other people. And I guess because I've stuck by that standard, I don't necessarily think of it consciously. It's just something I'm used to. I mean, you just get used to thinking a certain way, and you have an ideal. And if you, in my case, my art form is music, or if you're a painter or a good chef, those ideals come through in your work. So I think getting the award for the Hall of Fame was just a very nice thing to happen, because I thought to myself, well, it's a little pat on the back. Some people have decided that what I'm doing is worthwhile, and on that level, it just gave you the incentive to keep on trying to keep your standard high and do the same thing.
And the same would go for yourself, meeting up with the Dalia Lama and all that sort of stuff as well?
Yeah, when I met the Dalia Lama and got a chance to play with him, I played in an Indian band called Indian Pacific that was run by probably one of the greatest musicians I've ever worked with, Professor Manfred Junius. And he taught me a lot about Indian music. I first got into Indian music when the Beatles had Sgt. Pepper's out. And then I pursued Indian music to quite a large degree, because I was just so entranced by it. So having the opportunity to play in Indian Pacific was a great learning curve for me, and Michael, Professor Junius, was very generous in the amount of information that he was happy to pass on. And it was a two-way street, because we were fusing Western and Eastern music, and it was called Indian Pacific because of the two great oceans, the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, have got a lot to do with Australia. So there's an Asian content of musical influence, and there's an American content of musical influence. As a result of that, we were asked to play for the Dalia Lama, and Professor Junius wrote a piece called Messenger of Peace at the United Nations Meditation Centre in New York, and that's how it all eventuated. But whether you're playing for the Dalai Lama or whether you're playing for a bunch of kids at a kinder, whether you're going to an old folks home and playing, whether you're playing at a front bar with a whole pile of people, or playing at WOMAD, or you know, a big concert like that. The cause and effect is always the same, that once you throw music out to people, what comes back to you is twice as much as what you threw out.
Yeah.
It's great English, that is what you throw out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It comes back to you, and therefore it might be a song you played for 10 years, but it develops because you see how people react to it.
Yeah.
The kind of music I play, which is blues and roots and original and versions of other people's tune, is quite flexible.
Yeah.
And the great musicians that I work with, a lot of them I've known for years, are quite used to my playing, so they'll know that, okay, there's a form to the song, and then there's a part where we improvise.
Yeah.
And so what happens then is that you play according to that day, and people pick up on that, because that's what they don't get to do when they're sitting at home listening to a record. It's always the same every time they hear it. So there's an element of, I guess, what the ancients would have called alchemy, really. A bit magical.
Yeah, yeah. You've in the process of writing some more material.
Yes.
As always, you just don't stop.
No, it's oh, sorry, carry on.
No, go.
It's a funny process, that one, because years ago I used to think, all right, I'm going to write an album, and I'd write, you know, and it needs 15 songs, and this will be song number 1, and this will be song number 2, and you just throw that out the window because it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So you just write the songs, and some of them work and some of them don't, and the ones that don't, you might muck around with to try and make the square peg fit the round hole and for the song to work. Or you might put it down and pick it up years later. There's a song I wrote called Miles Away. I wrote the first 2 verses in 1975, and the last 3 verses in 2002, when I was playing up in the McDonald Ranges at Glen Helen.
Yeah.
And it was deeply affected by the nature up there. So the reason I put the song down was I just couldn't find the verses I wanted, but the melody didn't go away. I was working with another musician, Colin Offord, and I sang in the melody. He said, that's a good tune. So it was looming around for years, you know, over 20 years, and came back again. So some songs go through that process, some you write straight away. Other times I've sat there with a piece of paper and said, right, I'll write a song, and I've sat there with a blank piece of paper for half an hour and nothing's happened. And then you get an idea at 4 o'clock in the morning. Yeah. And most of your ideas you get when you're in that sort of open space. So I always just carry a notebook around with me, because I'm an analog man in the digital world, so I carry a notebook and pen, and if I get an idea I jot it down. Yeah. Eventually you've got enough stuff sitting around where you say, well, that's enough stuff for an album. And then you think, well, if it's going to be an album, it's got to have some theme behind it. You can't just throw the songs on willy-nilly. You've got to have a starting point and finishing point. Yeah. You can go through different musical formats. In the latest CD of mine, Finnen on Finnen, there's some folkloric music, there's some Indian influenced music, some African influenced music, and some straight out blues. So it's quite important as to what order you put the songs in so that they work for people. Yeah. And that process is just the one I always go through when I write. Yeah. And speaking of which, with the passion that you show, you were touching just off camera before about your influences with African music. Yes. And you just touched again on the Indian music aspect, and how you've been influenced by that. That's given you a little bit of an edge, hasn't it? You know, as an artist, you would think? Yeah, I think it has. I mean, I love the blues with a great deal of passion, and I've been lucky enough to work with some of the greatest blues players in this country. Dutch Tilders, Matt Taylor, Phil Manning, Kevin Borick, have all been friends of mine for many, many years. Yeah. And so we work a lot together, but because I have my interest in other musical forms as well, it ends up coming out in the blues in a subliminal way, which is really good. I mean, I can remember years ago playing a gig, and this guy came up. I was playing the old Diddley Hotel in town, and he came up and he said, oh, I like that little Indian influence you had in your music, that Indian beat you did. And I thought he might have been, the concert the night before was at the Festival Theatre with Indian Pacific, and I thought he'd heard me there. I said, oh, I'm glad you liked it, you know. And he said, oh no, he said, I've just got into town today off the train from Perth. He said, I meant this afternoon. Now, to all intents and purposes, I didn't consciously play an Indian sounding piece, but because I've been playing for so long, it came out in one of my guitar solos. And that's the lovely way for it to work, because then it comes out natural. It's not contrived, and that whole process just takes time. Yeah. Yeah. That's a remarkable comment, the way you mentioned that. Just the nature of letting the music flow itself rather than
some people just sitting there trying to.
I think the way that
come out with.
Yeah, I think the way that happens is that I listen to music day and night every day.
Yeah.
And I listen to as many people as it's possible to listen to. So I'm never going to get stuck for ideas.
No.
I mean, occasionally, if you played 7 days, you might get a bit like someone just varnished the floor and you vanish yourself into a corner. But the more stuff you listen to, the more ideas are going to occur to you, and you've just got this little directory of ideas. So,
yeah. We've got a remarkable room here. Chris has. He's got guitars, some lovely instruments too. Would you like to just mention some of them, perhaps?
Well, yeah.
That one that was handmade in Queensland you were mentioning before.
Oh, yeah.
You can't see it, unfortunately.
Well, I can grab it for you. Oh. It's, Now this is derived from an African instrument known as a birimbau, which has 1 string and also a gourd, and Colin's just developed the instrument to incorporate a lot more strings and a lot more gourds. In fact, he has one at home which has about 20 strings on, which he spent a couple of years developing. Then you have other instruments which come from other cultures which are kind of interesting. This little one here I use sometimes at my gigs. It's known as a Dan Moi and comes from Vietnam, and I've used it on a number of my albums. And it's just basically, they're made actually from old bullet casings. They've got these lovely little cloth cases for them, and by using your soft palate, your cheeks and your tongue,
unbelievable.
So again, you've got an instrument that once you put that through a PA, amplify it, it sounds huge. It sounds, it has sort of Aborigine connotations to it. So little instruments like that, it's nice to use them in amongst things like guitars. Just to give different flavours. One other quick one, which I've also used on the Finnen album, because you'll probably end up playing a track from that on your radio station.
Sorry, you've got to reach over it.
So is this clay pot, which is this is an African one, but the Indian ones I prefer. They're thinner clay, but they've got a beautiful bass end to them. So on the actual recording, what sounds a little bit like a double bass is simply just that pot being played. So yeah, I've just collected stuff as the years have gone by, and found a way to use them in my own music. So,
and you've got a wall-to-wall library of CDs as well.
Yeah, that never stops. It never stops. I can remember as a teenager my mother giving me money to go and buy a new pair of shoes, and I came back with some records and got into trouble for it, but it hasn't stopped either.
Yeah. It's been lovely chatting with you, Chris. Thanks so much. Chris is in a moment's going to play a composition of his own, a song that he's written regarding. Well,
it's called "All My Friends Are Going Down That Lonesome Road," and you get to a certain age where you start losing friends, and some subject material is usually passed by. People don't necessarily want to write about it, and certainly if you're going out and entertaining people, you don't want to make them feel bad. But I wrote this tune and I played it, and I played the Fringe this year and played the tune at it, and got quite a positive reaction from people. Where I mean, apart from music being entertaining, I think it has to do things for people, and sometimes as a musician you can sing about things that other people might feel, but they don't have the ability or the inclination to sing about. And so if you sing a song about a subject material that they're experiencing in their own life, you can give them some kind of solace, some kind of relief, or they're going to feel like, oh gee, it's not just me, I'm not completely alone, someone else understands it. And that's the reason for doing it.
Yeah. Chris Finnen, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
My friend, going down that lonesome road. Oh, my friend, Lord, 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 they're going down that lonesome road. Yeah, they're all gonna meet their maker. You know, some of them ain't that old. Heart attacks and cancer can come up quick or take a real long time. Heart attacks and cancer can come up quick or take a real long time. When it's time for you to move on up, just take the next place in the line. Now if you truly love your life, then you gotta love all your family and all your friends. Yeah, if you truly love your life, you gotta love all your family and all your friends. 'Cause they're gonna be the ones left there crying when your life comes to an end. Now I've seen people go out bravely, even though I know they're scared to death. I've seen people go out bravely, Lord, 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 even though I know that they're scared to death. And I've seen people hang right on, even though they had next to nothing left. Now you just gotta love your family. Give them all your precious time. You gotta love your family. Give them all your precious time. 'Cause when they don't have you to hug and hold no more, you know you're still gonna be on their mind.